You can have security at every level. So if you have category managers who can only see or be responsible for their category, or if you have pricing analysts responsible for a certain number of categories, if you have a primary admin, as I'm going to log in as the admin here myself. As you land here, you can see there's a menu here on the left-hand side, has a good feel for the flow. Let's start though with our dashboard. So right away, you can see that we're providing some really strong reporting so that you have a good feel for how your performance is currently within the marketplace. So up here, you can see my period roll up. In this top quadrant, I'm just looking at current year performance versus prior year performance in the trailing month. And that's all three of my key metrics: units, revenue, margin, and actually margin percent as well. So 4 of those key metrics are represented here. So really good feel for my existing performance as it relates to this category of stocks. To the right, you can see the variance analysis. This can be particularly helpful. It allows you to look at not only current month to prior year month, as you see in that performance analysis on the left-hand side, but it also helps you look at current month to prior month in the same year. This can be really helpful. If you're growing exponentially, a year-over-year analysis is almost meaningless. You really want to be looking at prior months or trailing quarters to make sure that you're maintaining the type of growth and taking the share that you expect to be doing. So this gives you just a different slice where you can compare current month to the prior month and also current month year over year, prior quarter, current quarter year over year, etc. Lots of flexibility. Down here you have in the bottom left, you have cost and margin trending. Pretty straightforward, just looking at your average cost for this category over the trailing 5 weeks, trailing half, and the trailing quarter. Same for your average selling price and your margin, your average margin dollars. And then you have your price and volume trending as well. So now you can see how your list price is trending over time. And again, similarly, the trailing 5 weeks, trailing half, trailing quarter. First, let me show you just the ability to maneuver between periods. It updates dynamically. But you can also maneuver between categories. You can roll up, roll down. But I'm going to drill into jackets. Unit performance is down. Perhaps I'm not so nervous about that because revenue is closer, but margin percent is also way down. So I'm starting to get nervous about what is going on in this category. Some of the current month-over-month metrics are clearly trending downward year over year. So we're going to have to do some investigation into this jackets category to figure out if we can potentially adjust our pricing to make an impact and deliver the type of growth that we're expecting to achieve. So I'm going to click over to the cluster analysis summary. Again, this all flows left to right. So you have this here if you need to refresh the page. You can export tables and charts. I'm going to pull some things in and slice and dice so you can see that. But first, let me just pull in a couple columns. So I know that jackets are giving me problems. Perhaps I want to start looking for an area, specifically in margin. So I may want to look for areas where I can start to creep the price up. So I'm going to turn on the population density, and I'm going to say that I want to see the median household income. Now, again, we've already built our clusters. This is just layering in demographics that we can visually see to help describe who's in our clusters and how they're behaving. So right away, cluster 10 looks a little bit interesting because they have really strong median household income. They also have fairly strong, in reference to other clusters, population. So this may be a good combination of strong income, strong population. Perhaps we can go and look for some value from those buyers. I'll just show you how easy it is to export a table. I click that. It spits out an Excel file. And right away, you have in a tabular form what's being represented at the bottom of this chart. You can export this chart as a PDF very easily. I want to see jackets is my category 4. I want to see how folks are ranking in jackets. And I can see that cluster 10, again, looks like one of the stronger performing groups. So if I'm looking to increase my margin, this may be a good combination of strong affluency, strong performance in the segment already. So I may not need to grow units. I might just need to creep prices up. And it has a decent population total in case I want to grow units. Allow this to kind of help you understand the story of your clusters. If I click this cluster 10, it takes me to my cluster analysis. And as you can see, it filtered me, it kept me in context. I'm now looking at additional information on cluster 10. I can see housing rented, and I can start turning on even more columns, latitude and longitude. In the interest of time, I'll just show you that you could plot cluster 10 on a map, similarly to how you saw in the demonstration. And if I clear that filter, that again, it kept me in context when I moved here, but if I clear that filter, you can see I can start turning on other clusters just to visually see how they're made up. I can make this map full screen if I'm not interested in that tabular view, or if I have broad global client set. So lots of flexibility in the UI and highly performant, moves around nice and easily. I'm going to show you how to build a scenario. If you had multiple scenarios, they'd all be listed down. You can see a start date and an end date. This is my default or my current base pricing, so it doesn't have a start and end date. And then you would be able to see when it last ran, date and timestamp. Let me show you how to quickly create a new scenario though. So we'll just create a scenario that says Dallas. You can set a start and end date. If you want to enact this at a certain point in time, you could set a start and a default end. Or if you wanted to evaluate a promotional period or some type of unique anomalistic period like we're in today with some of the current events, where you might want to make some short-term pricing decisions that won't last or carry through for the next 8 months, but you need to be responding to the market. So you can set a duration. I'll just make up a duration. I'll hit update. As you can see, my scenario pops up here. Couple cool options here. You could do a full run or a re-optimize. The difference between a full run and a re-optimize is the full run would rerun all of those steps that we talked about, starting with the clustering. And that typically happens on a scheduled basis. So there's no reason, well, not no reason, but most of the times you won't have to do that manually. There's the re-optimize button that allows you to just rescore those models. So you're not rebuilding them, and that can be pretty dynamic on the fly. There's also the ability to edit if you've already had it in place. You can duplicate it. So this is especially helpful if you already have a scenario that you like. You hit duplicate, and now you start with the baseline of that scenario. And then if you really love what you've done, you can set it as your new default, and now that becomes your base pricing. Two more things down here. You can archive. So if you like the version, but you want to clear it from your view, you archive it, it saves off, but it's not in the view. In the interest of time, I'm just going to delete this so that we don't have any clutter. And again, I'm going to go into this my first scenario, which has already pre-run, as I mentioned. You can see I've got my categories. So I've got a menu here along the top, and I'll kind of go through each of these tabs as we move through the demo, but very nice, user-friendly way to move throughout. I've got the ability to filter on each screen, and the show overrides, I'll do more in depth in a second. But you can see I've got my categories on the left. Jackets is what we really care about, but I've got all of them. I've got my objective. So one of the critical things in price optimization is setting an objective function that is very specific to that category goal. Going back to that example we had in the slides, if you want to aggressively grow revenue in a category, you're going to price it very differently than what we want to do for jackets, which is address our margin percent and our margin imbalances. So you set these objective functions by the category, and this in a normal business and a manual process could take a really long time to do. Just to show you some of the features, if I wanted to raise this, I could come in, I could type 15%, and it would take that override, and you can see it turns blue to let you know that you've just made an override. I can use this key to move things down and up on my global variables. And these different constraints here are your maximum decrease and increase. So this is how far you can vary from the current price. You can decrease by up to 10% or increase up to 10%. You can do that in whole dollar amounts if you have a good feel for dollar amounts in that category. You set your minimum margin. This is really important because you don't want to have max decreases and increases that maybe erode your margin. This can help protect you in two scenarios. One, if price is just trending down over time and you might dip into your margin, or if your costs are going up, yet you're not changing your global variables, this can help protect you. And that's one key thing with this system is it dynamically defers to, when you look at the boundaries, let's say max decrease and minimum margin, it's going to defer to the higher of those two on the low side so that you don't erode profitability. Similarly, on the high side, if you have a margin max or a maximum increase, it's going to defer to the lower of those two so that you don't gouge your customers or shock the market. When I click jackets here, it's going to take me into the locations tab. So we talked about managing price at every level of the hierarchy. Right here, I'm now seeing jackets by individual location, so I can start adjusting the boundaries that I just set by individual location. So I can change my max increase here to 15%. We really wanted to focus on cluster 10. I could change this max increase to maybe 20% if I feel like there's a lot of room and opportunity to bring that up. Now, that doesn't mean that the price is going up 20%. That means that you're allowing the optimization engine and the system to look for a price point that could go that high. In addition, I could filter this down to just cluster 10. I won't do that right now, but I could filter it down to just cluster 10 to make sure that I make those very targeted adjustments. And again, all your filtering and sorting is available on every page. You can see your CPI could be updated dynamically at a location level. If you have specific groups where, if you have regional competitors who tend to give you challenges in a certain region or a certain cluster of locations, you can adjust this there. If I click this show overrides only, let's say I made a bunch of overrides in this sheet, it will take me to exactly where I made those changes, which we just saw now, shows only those overrides, and now I can review that and make sure that I haven't broken anything or done something that I frankly didn't want to do. When we say every level of the hierarchy, we truly mean that you can manage at every level of the hierarchy. Click this item and you get down, and it's cranking through, as you can see, almost 1 million items. But you're going to get down to every single item, location, combination, as you can see here. And again, this loaded a ton of data. The performance of this system is amazingly powerful. Down here, again, if you wanted to, you could adjust these boundaries and your goals and objectives, how far you're willing to vary from your current price at this lowest level. I'll move on to the review process. Now, there's a couple ways you can go about the review. If you just want the big picture, you can flick over to this impact tab. Again, we've already run the pricing. Normally, you would click run after that, and then you get results. We've run it already. So right here, I can go over to this impact and visually see in a tree map where my impact is. So for margin potential, I have a ton of margin potential in jackets. Frankly, that's exactly what I wanted to see. And as you hover, you can see the dollar impact per item. So about $16.75 in margin per item. You changed, or you're about to change, roughly 20,000 items. And the margin potential is pretty substantial, a little bit over $300,000. And so right away, visually, I get a good understanding of what's going on. And this chart, again, updates dynamically for where your greatest opportunity is by category and by your objective function here. If you wanted to do a more detailed review, if you didn't just default trust the system and weren't just doing a quick sanity check, you could come over here to this review tab and do a couple things. This is really important. First, here you see margin, units, and revenue, and you see increases, decreases, no change total. What this means is the system is predicting what's going to happen for, in this case, all the instances where it made a price increase. What was the value of that? When it made price increases against your current. So this is current. If you left the price as is, you'd see about $1.2 million or 1.3. And if you raised it, you'd see close to $2 million in margin. A ton of insight here into what is projected to happen if you trust the system's recommendations. This is really good. We were looking to maximize margin. Here you can see that even when it decreased the price, you didn't really erode margin versus the current price. Current price would yield you about 500K unchanged. This is closer to 630, so about 100K difference. This is doing exactly what you would have expected it to do. And again, here you can be sanity checking the model. You can always drill into the category that you cared about, which is jackets. You see a pretty substantial margin increase. That difference of that 534 to 210 is exactly in line with what you saw on that higher level impact page. And you could dig into individual clusters if you wanted to go down to even further levels of detail. Again, you see for units and revenue here. Also in the bottom in this tabular view, you have the overall number of price changes that you made. Again, that visual of the revenue expected versus current and the average percentage price change. In addition to being able to see kind of that high level overview, you have this ability to go to this detail page. Detail page is critical. Remember, we've already showed you how you could adjust these boundaries and get the price to perform the optimization within the walls that you wanted to, but you may just want to purely override the price. You may look at this and say, you know what? I trust the system for most of these combinations, but this customer in this location is notoriously willing to pay more. So I'm going to leave them at their current price. I'm going to put them back at 119. I'm going to make any number of overrides here in this page at a detailed level. And now you can see that you've made that price override, right? So lots of flexibility all the way down to the lowest level of detail so that as a business owner, and this is especially important for managing your brand reputation, you control and own pricing down at the lowest level. There's one last screen here under review, bound details that can be really helpful. Flip into it quickly because you can see by item and by location, the maximum percentage increase, the minimum and maximum margin that you could have attained in whole dollars and percentages. And then you can also look at other columns like maybe which bound was hit. You can see it brought back by item, by location, which boundary was hit. And this is all to make sure that as a business user, as a category manager, as a merchandiser, as a pricer, you have clear visibility to why the system is making certain recommendations and how it landed on a price that it landed on. I'll flip to Insight to kind of start to round us out. This is really, really important. First, I'll go to this detail tab. I'm going to grab a SKU or item that I know I want to look for because, again, we have millions of items to choose from. And you can see we've got a visual representation. We've got historical monthly sales with price at the bottom and units at the top. So what's interesting here for this item location combination is, look at this. Over the last, really, as far back as we can look, this is the location price in gold. So sorry, let's go through this key real quick. You've got your cluster average price in purple. So as I hover, they turn dark. You've got your current price for the cluster in the sky blue. You've got your current location price in orange right there. You've got the average location price or your historical location price is plotted. You've got your optimized cluster price. So this is not the location, but how prices have been optimized for the cluster here in this green. And then finally, you have the optimized price that the system wants you to pull this individual location to. The reason this is all important is if you were looking at this in a vacuum, you would say, all right, my current price is $878, and I've been doing decent units, right? 90, 120, et cetera, et cetera. Why are you recommending that I pull this back to $790? Well, first, the problem is you've never changed prices in this individual location, right? These are all the historical periods plotted out. So this tells you that you would have had a data gap if you didn't have some visibility to the cluster level. But if you look at their peers, there's a steep curve here. As price went up, volume is absolutely going down along this curve. And so the system wants to rein that price in to see if it can drive more volume, which is exactly what you would want the engine to do. And so this is a very visual way for you to understand all those nuances. And if you wanted to ignore, let's say you wanted to just look at the location in a vacuum and ignore the cluster level things, now I can just see, again, what my historical prices were and what my optimized price is. So really powerful visual representation here. I'm going to go to the performance screen and look at this same product because, again, we just looked at the pricing as an impact on demand. Just so you know, we have millions of combinations in the system. And as you can see, as I type things in, it dynamically creates a pick list on the fly. It's powering through lots of data to bring me to the combination that I'm interested in. But it's important to not overemphasize price as a variable. So we need to look at what else might be driving pricing changes. So here We can see our life cycle. We can see the average selling price as it was coming down off the curve. Prices were initially trending down, which was probably fine, but then the average selling price started trending up. And you can see that as it trended up, units trended down pretty precipitously. It impacted revenue. It impacted margin a little bit, but margin was fairly strong. You can see your seasonality, so you can start to layer in multiple variables and really understanding why the system is making recommendations that it's making. And down here, you have this same visual information. You can hover to see the numbers, or you can see it in a more tabular view at the bottom. I'm not going to go through the reporting and the report builder, but I will show you real quick, what do you do if you love everything that you just did and you're ready to make some approvals? We spent more time on jackets, so I can mass approve everything. For the sake of just demonstration, I'm going to click here to approve jackets. But one other thing I can do is I can go into jackets, because again, we're managing at all levels, and I can say, you know what? I've approved everything, but there's this one person in cluster 3, they are not going to be happy about these 2 items that changed. And you can see the number of SKUs where the price changed, whether it increased or decreased. So again, always sanity checking as you go. And you can say, you know what? Price is going down. They're always willing to pay. I'm not going to approve that just yet. I'm going to change this to a pending status. And now you can see that that's now pending. So once I approve, everything will go through except this combination where we may need to go and talk to the sales rep or talk to the customer about any changes in price that we want to make. That was a really good overview of the system and helps you understand the power that a system like this can deliver for you and your organization.